Good afternoon and welcome back to another ironic introduction to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the Alliance Quest Season 7 mid-season update. I'll go over maps 4 through 7 mini-bosses, kind of my first impressions, my thoughts, as well as like some counterplay ideas I can come up with kind of like relatively on the spot. I've only done like a brief glance through the nodes myself, but I'll also talk about the new epic modifiers, the new rewards that come in the honor rewards as a result, and kind of like my first impressions and thoughts as well on the impending 6-star transition that I think is officially here. I'll talk about more of that, on the honor rewards. That said, I'll start by jumping into the map for mini bosses. So right off the bat, like, I'm not super excited to see Man-Thing and Mole-Man replacing Corvus Glaive and Ronin. Now, Corvus Glaive and Ronin had some frustrations to them, but I didn't feel like it was from the champions as defenders so much as the nodes that were on the champions. So replacing them with two defenders that are just outright frustrating in general, either by roster restrictivity or, Mole-Man being Mole-Man, I'm not super hyped. I'd really like to see these champions replaced with easier ones just in general. Like, overall, I was really happy with Ronin and Corvus Glaive as map 4 mini bosses, because while there was frustrations, it wasn't from the champion itself, so I didn't feel like it was as punishing. And map 4 is supposed to be like more relaxed, so I would like these mini bosses to kind of represent that more relaxed nature, and I don't think Man-Thing and Mole-Man represent. But that said, let's talk about the nodes and, well, some, ideas or solutions. So Man-Thing is going to have Enhanced Special 1, Special 1 Bias, Prey on the Weak, and Burden of Might. Now, Burden of Might really only affects you if you've got a lot of buffs, and you're not going to be wanting to bring a buffed champion into this fight anyways, so I wouldn't worry too much about the Burden of Might. Special 1 Enhanced, Special 1 Bias are not that bad as well. Man-Thing's Special 1s are not the hardest to dodge. It's the Prey on the Weak node that's going to be the real problem here. What makes Man-Thing so good of a defender in Alliance War is, on top of his incredibly high health, his can't really be crit damaged, is the fact that he stacks really well with Mystic Dispersion. Prey on the Weak is essentially Mystic Dispersion at 8%, or pretty much level 4 Mystic Dispersion. So what makes this so good with Man-Thing is he places toxic postural buffs on you, and those buffs, when they fall off, will give him a lot of power. So be really mindful of when you're building up toxic pustules, that when those fall off, and they do have a chance of falling off pretty much every time you make contact with Man-Thing, that he has a chance to be gaining a lot of power very quickly. So as long as you're watchful of that, his specials are very easy to dodge, but you do got to be careful. That said, be mindful that he does place Poisoned and Armor Breaks. That means like Red Hulk and Omega Red are two of like your best options for taking this guy down. Red Hulk is really good because the poisons will be shrugged off, giving you a lot of damage, and you can use willpower in order to heal off of the Armor Break, so you can take a lot of blocked hits, you can take a lot of specials to the face once you dodge the initial unblockable part, or if you need to block special 2s. So you shouldn't be worrying too much about health overall in this fight, so much as it's just power management and just a longer fight overall. Omega Red is good as well because Man-Thing can't be critted against, so having the degen damage from Omega Red's heavies is really powerful here. And again, most Omega Red players run attrition masteries and will already have willpower active, so you'll benefit there as well. There are other really good options like She-Hulk, I think, where the taunt will double up with Special 1 Bias and make kind of managing Man-Thing's power a lot easier, but overall, I would say that Omega Red and Red Hulk are probably your first go-tos, and if you can quake and shake this entire fight, that is an option as well. Next up, we'll move on to Mole-Man. So Mole-Man will have Boost Buff Unstoppable 2, making his Unstoppable buffs have 50% duration and ability accuracy, and while he is an Unstoppable buff active, the defender will fight more aggressively. He has Aggression, Precision, and Strike Back. Mole-Man is going to be one of the tougher defenders for sure. So you already didn't want to hit into Mole-Man's blocks. When you hit into his blocks, when he has Mole Mass, he goes unstoppable. And what happened before is you could get lucky, you could hit into his block or throw like a light attack into his block, and he wouldn't punish you for it, you'd get lucky. But now they're going to be longer unstoppable buffs when you hit into his block, and he's going to be fighting aggressively, so you can bet for sure if you accidentally hit into his block and trigger that unstoppable, you're probably eating a combo to the face. The strike back node isn't the absolute worst. Both Mole-Man's Special 1 and Special 2 are fairly easy to dodge. So just make sure you're not pushing him into a special 3, and you should be relatively okay here as well. I think the biggest thing with Mole Man is approaching this fight from the recognition that you want to push him into frenzy, because once he's in frenzy, you don't have to worry about him shrugging your stuns. Or you want to use champions who really punish stun shrugging. So Storm Pyramid X places a passive stun. Omega Red prevents the ability for him to shrug in general. Omega Red being king here, and he is a very common Alliance Quest champion, so hopefully you have one in your team as well. And then from there, you know, other champions, or just recognizing that a lot of your initial parries are going to get shrugged very quickly. So you need to get your damage windows in off of intercepts, off of special punishing, or waiting until Mole Man triggers frenzy, and then using the entire frenzy as kind of a reverse damage window. It seems counterintuitive because you're like, oh, Mole Man, doesn't he deal more damage when he's in frenzy? And yes, that is true, but while he's frenzied, he also can't shrug debuffs. So you are perfectly free to parry and get your damage in, and if you play it around that way, I don't think these nodes are that bad either. Mostly this fight is just getting used to Mole Man. That said, I'll stick a timestamp here because we're moving into map 5. So Guillotine 2099 will be placing Red Skull here, as well as Human Torch and Mr. Fantastic standing alone. So the only fight I need to talk about is Guillotine 2099. And Red Skull wasn't the most fun mini boss on map 5, but if you brought a Nullified champion, he was actually really reasonable, so I'm not super psyched to see Guillotine 2099 replace him, because Guillotine 2099 is a significantly more frustrating mini boss, but also I think, like, out of the 3 mini bosses, the ones that like players dislike the least was definitely Torch and then Mr. Fantastic. I feel like Red Skull was probably the least complained about, so for that to be the one they changed, I don't know, man. It just doesn't feel balanced. But that said, talking about Guillotine 2099 herself, we have combo up, so every 0.2 seconds, her combo meter will increase by 1. This is paused if you intercept for 15 seconds pause duration. She will have permanent combo shield, and she'll have soft guard. So first, I think it's incredibly important to look at Guillotine 2099 and show what she gets for having higher combos. So Guillotine 2099, for higher combos, she gets bonus attack rating for her combo meter, capping at 100 hits. After that, her attacks will deal a burst of damage for each hit above 100, scaling up to 600. So essentially, combo up is literally just like over time bigger hits, which wouldn't be too bad, except for soft guard. Each blocked attack reducing your block proficiency is going to make this quite a frustrating fight overall, because a big part of Guillotine 2099's mechanics is that you need to parry heavy her, or at the very least heavy her in general, in order to make it so she can't like miss your attacks. Or you can use champions who can't miss, but that selection of champions is not super huge. You're probably better off coming in here with like maybe an anti-robot to shut her down. Cosmic champions do have a better chance, so Medusa might be really clutch here. I think if you can play like Human Torch, if you can like play just completely ignore the soft guard, ignore the miss mechanic just by staying high temp. Nick Fury has access to anti-miss, but probably isn't a best option. I think Sunspot might work well here with a parry heavy, but I don't know how soft guard works with perfect block, if that like counteracts each other. If it does, then Sunspot obviously isn't going to be a good option here. Surprisingly, I think Silver Surfer is actually one of like the best options here as well, because his heavy allows him to phase, which means that you won't need to parry heavy Guillotine 2099. You could just heavy and then knock Guillotine 2099 down that way, and then you'll prevent the invisibility, the Digi-Cloak or the Invisible Cloak that way. So that's another really good option as well. I think Wasp, if you can properly land the heavies, is a risky potential, but you might be bringing Ghost in general, so that has a lot of use as well. Cap Infinity War just with like the overall high block proficiency, as well as removing the armor up on Guillotine 2099 to really give you accessibility to a lot of damage. Yeah, it's tough. Doom might be able to do this fight as well. So yeah, you're gonna need like one of these like higher tiered options. It's not the world's greatest fight. I'm not super stoked to see it, but I'd say outside of the soft guard, the other two nodes can be fairly ignored. So like essentially with this Guillotine 2099, what you have to worry about is chip damage. You're gonna have a lot of chip damage, and then Guillotine 2099 herself as a defender. So as long as you can deal with her in general, you should be relatively okay. So yeah, we'll move on to map 6. So Invisible Woman and Human Torch will remain, and we will be instead seeing Vision Arcus instead of Symbiote Supreme. I did not like Symbiote Supreme, personally. Definitely not a fan. So given they're replacing Sim Supreme with Vision Arcus, I'm actually okay with this. I feel like Vision Arcus in general is very, very easily countered by Mystic champions. I think Doom is very commonly used in Alliance Quest. Clairvoyant is very commonly used in Alliance Quest. And I feel like both of those champions are going to be really good options here, especially as I read through these nodes. So this is not the world's worst change for map 6, but even still, I'm not a huge fan of Vision Arcus in general. I have a lot of trouble with him myself. But let's read the nodes. So he's got personal space, so he'll see fury buffs, arc overload, which is not the worst, but you will have to worry about the healing factor there, and then aspect of Genesis, which means you're just going to want to burst him at that last part. So overall, I'd actually say these are like really reasonable nodes. I'm hesitant to say it, but I think Vision Arcus will actually be the easiest now of these 3 mini-bosses. As far as mini-boss changes go, I think this is probably the best one so far as player-centric. Yes, you're going to need that Mystic counter, but for people who are typically running map 6, there's probably a pretty strong chance you have at least a couple players in each battle group who can slot like Claire or Doom or Dr. Voodoo or one of these Mystic Nullify champions in, and then Vision Arcus is a lot easier to manage. So yeah, I'd say that's not bad at all. Even honestly, yeah, no, honestly, that's probably where I'll stick it. And then we've got map 7 changes. So Annihilus and Thing will remain, although Thing is going to get new nodes, I see. Welcome Sasquatch. Just like right off the gate, this is so stupid. Like it doesn't matter what the nodes are here. And I'll read them, and they're not the worst. But like, Sasquatch is new to the... How are you going to make one of the mini-bosses a champion that's brand new to the game? Like, this is like the dumbest thing I've ever seen. As far as balance goes, like, come on, wait a couple months before you F us in the... Okay, so I had my brief pause. This is like the 3rd time I've had that brief pause, but I think that's good enough. We're going to have to deal with it. So, besides the fact that I think it's absolutely absurd to put Sasquatch as a mini-boss when he's literally not in the game yet and will be in the game for a very short period of time when this goes live, let's talk about the nodes. So we've got Delayed Reaction. When the defending Sasquatch is knocked down, his chance to enter Wrath of Tanarak is reduced by a flat 10% until he's at max stacks of Rage. I actually think this is a bad thing, but I'll talk about that in a moment. He's got Power Snack 1. Every 7 seconds, the next buff triggered by the attacker is immediately nullified. You're not going to want to be buffing a lot anyways, but I think the biggest issue here is going to be dexterity, and when that effect triggers, the defender will gain 25% of a bar of power. Backup Recovery 1, when brought below 50% of the health, he gains a burst of 20% power. So again, balancing power control is really, really important here. And then Unblockable. All the defender's special attacks are unblockable. It's honestly tough to say. I fully expect Sasquatch to be a full melee special-based champion, but if he ends up being like Tigra, where his specials have insane amounts of reach and gap close, this could be really problematic overall. So to kind of talk about him, before I do anything, I need to bring up his abilities. I have my as fast as possible notes here. So I want to talk about why I think Wrath of Tanarak being reduced every time you knock him down being a bad thing. I think you're probably not going to want to knock him down, but hey, I could be wrong. So essentially, every time he gains a rage stack, he has a chance to trigger Wrath of Tanarak. And when he triggers Wrath of Tanarak, he goes stun immune. This could be very frustrating if you're going up against Sasquatch and you've parried him, you're relying on that parry timer, and then he suddenly goes stun immune and pummels you in the face. Additionally, while he has Wrath of Tanarak active, he has increased power rate and his specials cost significantly less. This is the key. His special 1 and his special 2 cost 50% less. So depending on how much reach he gets off of his specials, you actually don't want him to trigger a late Wrath of Tanarak. Because a late Wrath of Tanarak, even if you have him all the way on his side, he's got massive power rate gain, and the Wrath of Tanarak lasts longer depending on the amount of rage stacks he's built up. And as a result, his special 1 and special 2 are reduced. You run into this problem where he might be spamming a lot of specials, gap closing you really, really bad and pushing you all into the wall. Kind of complicated to say, because if his specials have really low reach, this isn't a big deal. Then it's actually a good thing, because then you'll use the power rate and the reduced special to punish and get your damage window in that way. But if they're super far reaching like Tigra, this might end up screwing you in the long run. So overall, I'm going to initially say this is a bad player base. You're not going to want to knock him down because you want him to trigger Wrath of Tanarak, use the stun immune to either bait a special or bait heavies, and then punish. Rather than relying on a longer Wrath of Tanarak phase. I don't know. It's tricky. Overall, I'm going to say it's probably best to not knock him down overall, which overall is going to make Torch or champions like Human Torch kind of worse in this scenario, or champions like Captain America Infinity War, who put a lot of emphasis on parry heavy playstyle. Power Snack 1, I'm not a huge fan of, because while you might not be triggering a lot of buffs in general, this will trigger off of dexterity, and I just really, really hate seeing nodes that are like, hey, turn dexterity off. But that might be the scenario where, people will just turn dexterity off. I don't think this is a big deal for Quake. Essentially, I would just start your fights with Quake by triggering dexterity right off the bat, like as close to each other as possible, or maybe start off with like parry, like Quake style, like Quake and Bake, where you Quake parry until you trigger the concussion, and then you can kind of prevent this from happening, because once you have the precision buff from dexterity active, you don't have to worry about it reprocking. Backup recovery is not the worst node as long as you're mindful of that burst of power gain, and then the unblockable specials, I have to wait until see. Overall, I'd say this is not the absolute worst mini boss, but in map 7, like Annihilus and Thing are by far way worse than Omega Red. So again, I feel like they've opted to take one of the easier mini bosses and replace them with potentially a harder one. We'll have to wait and see. I do see a lot of really good options here. I think Quake is very common in map 7. So overall, I don't think this is the biggest deal. People will probably just Quake this fight anyways. I just hate to see it. Next up, we'll move on to Thing. And honestly, rather than change the nodes on Thing, I wish they would just remove him from Alliance Quest. But hey, these nodes actually aren't that bad. So we're going to have Enhanced Special 1, which is not bad because you're already probably dexing the Enhanced Special. You're probably already dexing Special 1 to begin with. Kinetic Transference could be bad when you're running like the double Kinetic Transference if you're running Master Modifiers. But a lot of times this can actually be used to your advantage to build Thing up with charges if you're trying to juggle rock stacks. Footloose screams, bring a slow champion. You already kind of wanted to bring a slow champion to Thing. This just gives even more of an incentive for doing that because of Footloose. And then Do Not Go Gentle. Do Not Go Gentle is an incredibly stupid node to see in Alliance Quest, especially with Kabam's official response to Corvus Glaive timing out methods. So essentially, Do Not Go Gentle, if you're not intercepting them frequently or heavy attacking frequently, which are two things you don't really do against Thing very often. So I feel like that's really not good here to begin with. If you're not doing that frequently, you're going to build up charges for hits in your combo meter, and then at the end of the fight, if you would do a fatal kill on the defender, you're going to receive a bunch of damage based on the charges you have and the defender's attack. So what this says to me actually is Corvus Glaive timeout method. I just see a lot of people coming in with like Stealth Suit Spider-Man, knocking Thing down to like really, really low, like 5% or something, and then just pressing pause. That's just what I see. So I feel like this is really, really counterintuitive. Maybe these changes were in place months before the Corvus Glaive issue, but either way, I'd like to see Do Not Go Gentle changed out for something different. I feel like this node doesn't belong in Alliance Quest. There's kind of limited approaches to answers to this, and it's on a thing boss who already kind of has limited approaches to begin with, so I'm not a fan. But again, this is another fight I felt like people will just Quake anyways, especially in map 7 alliances where you definitely have Quake players in your alliance, and if you don't, you should really look into getting Quake players in your alliance. So overall, that's not too bad either, but I would like to see this node removed just because I feel like the rest of these are really fundamental to like playing around thing to begin with, whereas Do Not Go Gentle is kind of counterintuitive. So yeah, those are my thoughts there. We've got map 5 changes overall, and then epic modifiers. So timestamp here. So the first one is going to be power to cower. For every hit on the attacker's combo meter, the defender's power gain is increased by 1.5%, and their special attack cost is decreased by 1.5% up to 75% each. When the attacker uses a special 3, their combo meter is reset. This is not bad, especially if you're bursting champions down or if you're using champions who are special 3 centric. I think this comes into problems if you need to throw specials frequently. I can't think of like a ton of scenarios, but overall I'd say this is actually not too bad. The biggest issues is going to be on the nodes where there's already power gain. I think there's a map 7, no, I know there's a map 7 node path with 100% power rate. It used to be 200%, but now it's 100% power rate, and that's going to make this a lot rougher. Like, that path was already really rough. This is going to make it even worse, so I'm not a fan, but yeah, that should at least be interesting, and there's definitely a huge value gain, so I'm approaching all of these epic modifiers with kind of a grain of salt because there is a huge reward incentive for running these. So next up, yeah, so overall I think for most people this is fine. There's just going to be a couple problematic paths that are going to have to find creative approaches to their paths in order to handle this in particular. And then cascading failure. Critical hits against the defender trigger a timer for 2 seconds. While this timer is active, additional critical hits inflict debuffs on the attacker in the order of heal block, armor break, weakness, exhaustion, and then passive generation, each for 4 seconds, and refresh the timer and debuffs. Huh, interesting. Cascading failure, wow, that's interesting. Okay, so heal block being first is not the absolute worst. Not a ton of champions are super reliant on heals. Armor break says, hey, this is a ghost counter, and then weakness and exhaustion are probably the least frustrating, and then finally passive degeneration is probably potentially really ignoring, but it just depends. Like, they didn't give us a passive degen value here, so it's tough to say for sure. 2 seconds is kind of a long time, so I don't know if this is really going to emphasize the whole parry heavy playstyle, or bringing non-crit champions in, or bringing in champions that can ignore the first 4 and then balance the passive degen. I think Ghost actually ironically works really well here. It just automatically forces a completely different Ghost playstyle, where instead of doing like Ghost like you use Ghost for the phasing mechanic but not for the critting mechanic. So essentially you phase 4-hit combo or 3-hit combo slow combo to time out the 2 seconds, and then you reuse phase again. So it's not the world's greatest option, but I think you could still use Ghost around this, and you do have 1 heal block that you can ignore. Additionally, it's only 1 armor break and then it resets. So, and the armor break's only 4 seconds, so if you do make a mistake with Ghost, you do only have a 4-second period where you're SOL. So I think this one is actually like really reasonable, as long as that passive degen isn't absolutely miserable. I'll have to wait and see. Next up is Turn the Tide. One of the attacker's special attacks is randomly chosen at the start of the fight. The chosen special attack rotates every 10 seconds, or when the attacker ends a combo with an attack that didn't end their previous combo. The attacker's special attacks suffer 100% ability accuracy and 90% weakness unless it is the chosen special attack. I'm actually really okay with this one. This is like really nice. So essentially, you can choose to rotate your special attack by changing your combo ending. or you can just wait 10 seconds. And yes, I think Corvus Glaive, Captain Marvel movie, Doom, Ghost, these are like really, really common champions in Alliance Quest. But overall, like this one adds duration to your fight and adds kind of timing windows and is really not that bad. And it's not hard to stick to the same combo in order to make sure you don't accidentally rotate, or as long as the rotations are synchronized, as long as you're comfortable with like the Black Widow Clairvoyant playstyle where you do alternate combo hitting, or Ghost Rider where you alternate combo hitting. This is actually really, really reasonable. I think it'll take a little time for some people to get used to, but that's a full skill metric. At least from my perspective, I actually really, really like that. I'd say if you're running all 5, this is probably the one you're running last. So saith Doom. If the attacker is not hashtag Fantastic Four. What? Hashtag Fantastic Four. Alright. You have 4 options. Okay. So if the attacker is not hashtag Fantastic Four, 2 of the following actions are randomly chosen every 17 seconds. Intercept, debuff, use a special attack, or dodge an attack. Failure to perform the actions in time will debuff the attacker for the next 3 fights. The debuffs inflicted in order are heal block, armor break, weakness, fatigue, and concussion. Wow. Okay. Okay. Wow. I don't think... Okay, so you have 17 seconds. It's a pretty reasonable period of time. Heal block is rough. Like for a single fight mechanic and for 4 seconds, heal block is not bad. See above. But for 3 fights to be heal blocked is really rough. Armor broken for 3 fights, and I don't see any durations here, means that Ghost becomes virtually unusable. Wow. And you have to perform both. 17 seconds is a really long window. I will say it's a really, really long window. But at the same time, that's a really rough punishment. I still think this is an easier or skill-centric mechanic rather than these other 2. But wow, that's going to be interesting. I think the 4 options they chose are not that bad. You can dodge any attack. That's not too hard. You just short dex. Using a special attack is not unreasonable as long as you're not a Special 1 champion or you're breaking a power control champion. Sorry, a power gain champion. As long as the defender is not stun immune, parrying will work. I think this is going to be hardest when the defenders are stun immune. And then intercept the defender. Which is really not hard on map 7, which is typically where you're going to be running this anyways. You just do like a backdraft intercept. So yeah, probably like so far I would say Turn the Tide is the one you run last. I'm gonna say So Save Doom is the one you run 4th. While it can totally screw you, I'd say heal block first is not bad. Armor break only really sucks in certain scenarios. So like rip if you're a Ghost player, but you should be okay. And 17 seconds is a long time, so you should be relatively okay. Weakness is not bad. Fatigue is not bad. Concussion sucks, but you have to fail 5 times in a row, so you should be okay. Yeah, should be okay. And then finally, Parry Curse. Whenever the attacker stuns the defender, the duration of their future stuns is reduced by 25% to a maximum of 100% for the next 3 fights. This will not re-trigger during those 3 fights. Yeah, that sucks. I can't imagine an entire map 7 of stun immune champions. Yeah, so far I'm going to say this is probably the run you run first. I think just making it so stun debuffs is reduced by 25% even in the first fight is enough. To make that last for 3 fights is bullshit. This node modifier needs to be changed. Like, this is so much worse than the rest of these, given like the ISO enhancements in map 7 and like some of the fights being rough as is. This one is but yes. I would say the next one fight, if they want to have it carry over, would be balanced. The next 3 fights, like, this is really, really rough. And then you're going to have to deal with it again, which means you're probably going to have to deal with Parry Curse for, you know, a good 75%, 80% of your Alliance Quest fights. Yeah, so this is probably the run you run first when you are still relatively safe to bait heavies and punish those. Yikes, that's rough. So yeah, I mean, obviously, again, the playstyle here is Quake, Ghost, and, you know, baiting heavies, or taunting champions and punishing specials, or heavily relying on intercepts. It's not the best, but those are your options. Finally, we'll talk about the rewards. So the reason why I've tried not to bash too much on the modifiers, because I recognize they are they're called epic for a reason, is because there's a very clear distinction on the rewards that you're getting here that is tier 5 class catalysts. This is arguably the official transition into the 6-star meta. I would make the argument that before this presence in Alliance Quest of running map 7 with epic modifiers and having access to tier 5 class catalysts on a weekly basis, notably more than you would get in Alliance War if you were tier 1 or rank 1 Alliance, which is 30%. Every Alliance has access to this. Regardless of prestige, regardless of, you know, your overall like ranking in Alliance Quest, as long as you're running map 7 epic modifiers, you have 10% of a tier 5 class catalyst accessible to you every single week. And this is it. This is the official transition. I don't think 6 stars are suddenly going to be meta, because I think this still stands that mostly it's just high-end, high-tier players where 6 stars are slowly already transitioning. But this is the official shift. I would say the player base as a whole can officially start saying 6 stars are coming. Like, the 6-star meta is approaching. It's finally stepping forward, because this is the first actual accessibility in game. Like, yes, we had 6-star rank 3s accessible in Abyss of Legends and Act 6, but I wouldn't say those are like really, really great, because it's not consistent. It's just like one-offs. This is your presence in game, and a year from now, just this alone will see tier 5s or rank 3 6 stars as a result of Alliance Quest. This is a big deal. This is a really, really big deal. This is the official shift. It's a really slow shift, and it's going to still be tailored to the high end. But I would expect that now that it's here, maybe 3 months from now, we'll start seeing trickle down. And that trickle down will come. So yeah, I look forward to that. And then the standard Alliance Quest changes. So that is all. That is the mid-season update. Absolutely crazy. Let me know what you think. Maybe I didn't talk about something enough. Maybe you want more of my opinions. Let me know. But I'm already losing my voice. So that said, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.